And here we are all doing what Sally most cared about, which was talking about the future and women's role in it. As many of you know, Sally became my friend when I reported on NASA for ABC News. When I anchored her launch that June day in 1983, I knew that we, and especially we women, had touched the future. And since Sally Ride first crashed through the celestial glass ceiling, essentially telling women and girls that they could do anything, since that date, 2 generations have grown into young women. So what is their future? How do they get there? That's what we're here to talk about today. I am most grateful to the folks here at UCSD for sponsoring this, for organizing it, for managing it so wonderfully, and of course to Tam O'Shaughnessy, Sally Ride's life partner, who began it all, as you heard, back in 2018. As for my co-conversationalists, and this is going to be a conversation, not all Q&A, I know you can read all about them in your programs and online. So briefly, I will introduce my dazzling co-panelists as they come to join me. First of all, alphabetically, Ina Garten. The barefoot Contessa herself. Come on out, Ina.
Hi.
Brilliant chef.
Can I sit here?
Super savvy businesswoman, everyone's favorite hostess. And by the way, she is my good friend. I've actually been at a bunch of those dinners, and she's exactly the same person you think she is.
Except my language is worse.
Also true. Michelle K. Hanabusa. Michelle is the graceful and elegant figure skater, co-founder of the nonprofit Hate is a Virus, savvy fashion entrepreneur, and much, much more. And Margot Lee Shetterly. Margot, as you know, is the author of the phenomenal best-selling book, Hidden Figures, which led to the equally eye-popping movie, both changing our understanding of the history of the American space program. Welcome to all of you. I'm so happy that we're getting a chance to have this conversation. And in case I forgot to mention it, interrupting each other is okay, because I have this feeling we all have so much to say about so many things, so feel free to jump in and I'll be the traffic cop here. Besides being such enormously accomplished successes, these women share something very special and a little bit unique. You have all switched gears in the middle of your lives or early in your lives, and started doing one thing and then did, I'm going to say 180, maybe you think it was closer to 320 or whatever, and went somewhere else. So I want to start by talking about that. How does reinvention work for women, and what can we learn from your journeys? And Michelle, I want to start with you, because you trained for the Olympics since a little kid. You got up those god-awful hours, right, every morning?
Yes. Oh, yes.
And went, and then you had hip surgery.
Yes.
What happened? How did you do it?
Whew. I'm going to go back in time. I wanted to become an Olympic figure skater because I saw Michelle Kwan on TV. And at that moment that I saw her on TV, I was like, I'm going to be just like her. And so I actually begged my parents. They're with me today, sitting right here.
Oh, I forgot. You got up to go figure. They took you there.
Yes,
So
exactly.
they got up earlier than you did. We thank you for that.
And so from 5.5 or so, I begged them to be like, please take me to the ice rink. And so they finally caved, like, let's take you once a week. And then I begged them even more. So it became a daily thing where it was 6 days out of the week. We were waking up at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning to train. Wow. And for 14 years of my life, my childhood and early adulthood, that was my main focus. Until, I was complaining about my hip for about 2.5, 3 years, and one day I woke up and I couldn't stand on my left leg. And so my dad was like, think this is more than just a little injury here. Let's go check it out. And after many, many different medical examinations, they're like, you're going to have to get hip surgery and basically rethink about what you want to do in the future, because being an Olympic athlete is no longer in your cards.
And you were how old?
At that time, I was 16.
And you
17.
had spent how many years training for this?
Started at 5.5, 6, so.
11 years of your life.
Yep.
Gone.
Yes.
Okay. How'd you do the switch, and what came next?
It wasn't a one-time thing, one day where I woke up and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I actually kept on trying to figure skate. So I figure skated, started a club in college as well called the USC Ice Girls, and we would perform during hockey games. And it was still very much a passion of mine, but part of this journey happened because I was bedridden for quite some time. And during that moment, you know, I couldn't be active. I couldn't hang out with my friends. I couldn't go to school. And the only thing I can do at that point was, okay, graphic design. I'm still a creative person. I love the arts. Should we explore that? And my aunt at that time was a graphic designer, so she gave me a book. It wasn't really a YouTube situation where I can learn how to do graphic design at that time. So I laid horizontal on my bed and flipped through this Adobe Creative Suite and tried to figure out, okay, is graphic design my next path?
And it was.
It was part of the journey.
Okay.
So I dabbled with that and went to school. There was a really interesting program at USC at that time where you can learn how to be a designer, but let's also think about the business, the marketing, the communications of it. And that was probably one of the milestones of being like, okay, I think this is the path for me. I'm not sure if graphic design is going to be my end goal, but let's start there. And fashion was the first job that I got outside of college.
So now, how do you describe you are an entrepreneur in the fashion business? And we'll get to your nonprofit in a bit, but you went from skating to fashion. Is there a connection? Is there anything you learned in your skating life that helped you get to where you are?
That's a great question. After, I think this reflection has happened really recently where it's about that persistency, it's patience, and it's also having that drive for that goal that you want to achieve. And in my figure skating days, it was waking up every morning, training, you're falling a million times, and you're training up for that one competition, and you have to perform, and you have to land all of those jumps and spins. And so I think just training and going through that rigorous mindset of being like, I'm not going to stop, I'm going to keep going, has been implemented into our everyday entrepreneur lifestyle. So every day is a new day.
And I want to point out, just to button all this, the newest number I have is that 94% of all female executives have a background in sports. How about that?
Yes.
How about sports as a beginning for all sorts of things, right?
I love that you brought that up because was it the Ernst & Young article?
I can't remember. I'm sorry. I don't have my background notes here. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like over 90% of C-suites and manager roles and founders and CEOs have a sports background. So it's really fascinating.
So you start one place, land another. Okay, moving on to Margot. Margot started out in life as a banker. Then she went to Mexico and she was a publisher. And then she came home and wrote a best-selling book. How'd that happen?
I'm still trying to figure out how it happened, actually. You know, it's really funny. Because when I was 9 years old, I told my parents I was going to go work on Wall Street. Like, that's what I wanted to do when I was 9. And that's what I did. I studied finance. I went to Wall Street. I worked at J.P. Morgan, foreign exchange trading, and worked at Merrill Lynch and fixed income capital markets. And, when I first got out of college, I figured that I'd, do that and then become some, master of the universe, right? In the sort of 1980s, 90s sensibility. And
that was a good thing in your mind at that
it
point.
was, yeah. It was in my mind. I was, I saw myself as this, this like coming, like somebody. I wanted that for myself, and I was like, you know what? I can be that person too. Like there really was sort of like, hey, I'm, doesn't matter that I'm a woman. It doesn't matter that I'm Black. I'm going to be that person too. Like there really was a thing about that. And then, after like 5 years, it was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I'm restless. I ended up working in internet media, met a little brief kind of side thing in public television, met my husband at another software company. And then we literally got married, bought a car, moved to Mexico, started a magazine for expats. And while we were living in Mexico, I started working on this book. So it's actually, it's when I tell this story and I'm listening to myself tell the story, I'm like, wow, that person's absolutely nuts. Who is that? But everything that I did along the way felt like it was necessary to get to this point where this thing of being a writer is the best job I've ever had. It's amazing. But I feel like every point along the way, I had this little bucket and there were these things that I collected in the bucket, and that now as a writer and as a business person, I am the person who creates the book, but then there is this entire thing of making a living and supporting the book. So there is still a business aspect to it. So listening to you talk about being an entrepreneur, is and I want to learn more, because being a good entrepreneur, you always learn from people. That's a part of it too. So everything that I had along the way has made a difference.
You have talked, Margot, about the transformative power of story. What is it about? You didn't tell stories when you were a banker. That was a different thing. You didn't, as a publisher, you wrote about, there were stories in there, but it's like you suddenly discovered story. You discovered narrative. What was that about?
Well, I always loved books. I mean, I absolutely always loved books. I was a little kid who didn't go outside and play. I was sitting in my room reading books. I loved books so much. But I will say that I think that almost any endeavor that you're involved in, it does involve a certain amount of story. And you have to persuade people. People make decisions for reasons that have to do with facts and figures, but people make decisions also for reasons that are emotional, because they like people, because it clicks with them in a certain other way. Even when, it's something like in finance, which is supposed to be very cut and dried, we make decisions for a lot of reasons. So I think we're always telling some kind of a story whenever we're interacting with people. But I think the book was really about kind of telling my story without being in it. Like I don't want to, be in the story, but being kind of the observer and thinking about myself as a sort of end result of this history that I wrote about. My dad worked, he's the next generation after these women who wrote about as a research scientist at NASA. So it was, working out some of the same things in a way that made me say, I'm going to Wall Street and I'm going to be that person. And looking at these women who, in a sense, did a similar thing. They're like, well, it doesn't matter that, I've never known that a woman, much less a Black woman, could be a mathematician. I'm going to be that person. So there's something very resonant about that for me.
And we'll get into the book and what that's about in a bit. But our third change of life story, if you will. Ina, you were a budget analyst in Washington. How did you go from being a government wonk to a lifestyle hero?
I don't know about the lifestyle hero, but thank you. Well, I mean, I think when I was young, because I'm of a generation that didn't have role models, and Gail Sheehy, our mutual friend, wrote about this, women wanted to become the men that they knew. And I was married to somebody who was in policy work. I mean, he worked in the State Department for the State Department. And so I applied for and got a job in the White House in Office of Management and Budget in nuclear energy policy, unlikely as that is. They leave it to 25-year-olds. I can't even understand it now. And I thought that was a great thing to do. And then when I got closer to 30, I thought, this isn't me. This is Jeffrey. This isn't who I am. And
does the word bored come in there at all?
Out of my mind. I mean, everything we were doing was going to the president, so you really feel like there's it's really important. But we would put something in the budget, they would take it out. Congress would take it out. Then we put it back in, take it out. And at some point, you realize nothing has happened. And that was 1975. Can you imagine now? I can't even imagine. So when I was literally sitting at my desk thinking, I've got to do something else beside this, and I saw an ad for a specialty food store for sale in the New York Times. And I thought, now that sounds like fun. And so I went home and I said to Jeffrey, I said to Jeffrey, I really hate my job. I really need to do something else. And he said, pick something fun. Don't worry about whether you're going to make money. Just pick something you think would be fun. And I said, funny you should mention it. I saw this ad for a business for sale, and he said, let's go look at it. I mean, what a hero, really. I think he thought he was humoring me, but I don't know what he was thinking.
He's a hero. He's a hero.
Yeah. He really is. And 3 days later, we drove up to a place I'd never been before, which was West Hampton Beach.
On Long Island,
on Long Island. I'd never been to the Hamptons before. I had no idea where it was. And I walked into this 400-square-foot specialty food store, and they were baking chocolate chip cookies. And I thought, now this I can do. So I made the woman a very low offer thinking, well, she'll come back, we'll negotiate, we'll drive back to Washington. This is never going to happen. And I was in my office the next day, and she called me and said, thank you very much, I accept your offer. And I went, oh, shit. I think I just bought a specialty food store.
Well, it wasn't overnight success, but you got there pretty quickly.
I got there pretty quickly, yeah.
I have to interject here. I love this story, and I want to remind you all of a story that Sally Ride used to tell, which was she was, of course, at Stanford getting her PhD in physics, astrophysics, and she was about to go and become a professor, and that was going to be her life, academia. And she walks into the Stanford cafeteria one morning to get her breakfast, picks up her, donut and her coffee, and opens the Stanford Daily, and there is an article that says NASA is looking for people who are not jet fighter pilots, who are not white male military guys. They want scientists, they want women, they want people of color, they want minorities, and to apply to be an astronaut. And this was 1976, I think. And Sally puts down her breakfast, immediately goes next door, gets a pen, gets a paper, gets an envelope and a stamp, remember them, and sends in her application. And later on, people would say to Sally often, what's your one advice for young women wanting to get ahead? And she said, read the campus newspaper. So I said to Ina, your advice
read the New York Times.
Read the New York Times, yeah.
I don't even know if they have this, like the business opportunity section where you can buy like a cleaners or a frozen yogurt store.
You have said, and I want to quote you, the best example I can give to other women is to be independent and have a good business and be able to take care of yourself. But you have to
Did
get
I say
there.
That?
You did say that, yeah. You've said some wise things.
I think one of the things I knew when I was in the government is I was never going to be the head of the organization because it was going to require a man to choose me. And that, certainly in 1975, was never going to happen. I don't know if it happens now. but I didn't want to depend on that. And so I decided I needed another track where the only thing that was limiting me was my intelligence and my drive and my business sense. And so, and especially food store, and then later switching gears a second time to go into cookbooks, I knew that if I wrote really good cookbooks and they sold really well, I'd have a great business. But it didn't require somebody choosing me to be successful. My success depended on me.
Not depending on someone else. Which leads me to another question for all of you about this exact same thing. Who were your mentors? Who told you, you got this from you?
Yeah, I got this from me.
You got this from you.
I mean, I think we all need one person to really believe in us, and I think that's really helpful. And I mean, for me, it was Jeffrey.
I'm sorry.
We each need at least one person to really believe in us. And if it's a parent or a colleague or a friend, I mean, in my case, it was Jeffrey, which was incredibly powerful. I don't know, who was it for you guys?
Ooh, I have many. Do you want to start?
And there you go.
Okay.
Well, I think people who got up at 3 o'clock in the morning were.
Yes.
No, I think that's pretty obvious.
That's actually going to be my answer, but yeah. I never thought that I would be an entrepreneur, founder, designer. Growing up as a fourth generation Okinawan Japanese American, you're taught to, whether this was within your subconscious or not, you're taught to just put your head down, do the work, and just continue to live and be in a safe space. So for me, I thought that I had to do what everyone else was doing for the longest time. Once figure skating was no longer an option for me, it's to go to college. Then let's get a great job. Let's get that 401k with really great benefits, you know? And so I really struggled with that because it was putting myself in this box. Mm-hmm. And maybe we can get into this later, but there was one day where I just was like, I've had enough. A lot of various lived experiences happened over the years, and I basically told myself I need to create my own space within my community in order for our voices to be heard. And so my current day business is the third attempt at trying to create a business. The first one failed, the second one failed, and I ended up calling my dad. I was in tears. I was just like, maybe I just suck. Like, this isn't the right path for me either. And the biggest confidence booster was sitting down with my parents, and they said, we are here for you emotionally. We believe in what you want to build, and whatever happens along the way, we're here.
Wow.
To support you. And so I think I really give it to my parents to give me that confidence that I could maybe do something in this world.
Lucky you, and how wonderful. Mentors for you, Margot?
Yeah, you know, I'm listening to Michelle talk about like a lot of the things that she's saying, and I'm like, yep, I've been there. You know, my parents were amazing, but they were also like, listen, go to college, do really well, get a good job, get your 401k, like the whole thing, you know. That totally.
Did you two have the same parents?
You know, it was really that, like, that's keep your head down, the whole thing, and become a scientist. And really, that's, you know, my dad in particular was like, you know, go into science, go into engineering, you'll always have a job. It's very good. And so when I went to Wall Street, it was like, okay, I think we can understand that kind of. And then when I was like, guess what, I'm leaving Wall Street, and I went and worked at an internet startup, all this other stuff, they were just like, okay. I mean, they were always supportive, even if they didn't really understand it, you know. And then when my husband and I were like, hey, we're moving to Mexico and starting a magazine, of course, they were just like, this is totally beyond. But, you know, they were this one real, I mean, always so supportive. And then my husband, so when you talk about, you know, having this partner who believes in what you're doing, you know, this other part of my career here, of becoming a writer. My husband's a writer. He had written a book before before or kind of simultaneous to us going to Mexico. I mean, it's all just like so crazy, all the stuff that we did. But he was like, you know what? You have to write this book. You know, he and my dad were really the ones like, okay, you have to write this book. Don't go to grad school, which is one of the things that I was like, well, maybe I can go back to school and get a history PhD as a backup plan. It could be my dissertation. They were like, you know what? You have to do this. And having that support, like having people in your lives who support you. I mean, I think you can have all the talent in the world. You can work very hard. I think there's a real difference that happens when you have those people.
Well, as she said, to have one person who really supports you.
One of the things that I think I'm hearing, this was not my experience, so hearing this, is parents want you to be safe, which is why they want you to have a good job and a 401k. Part of being successful is getting out of that safe space and really just making sure you're breaking out of the box. There's this great expression that's attributed to George Lucas: we're all living in cages with the door wide open. And I think it's such a great thing to remind ourselves is that we have this cage around us, but we can get the hell out of there. But we just have to figure out how to do it.
Which is a perfect lead-in. We have a number of questions. Thank you all very much for submitting them from those of you here and in other places. I'm going to sprinkle some of them throughout our conversation. Ina, this first one's for you. How did government experience prepare you for the rest of your career?
Not at all. No, actually, that's too glib. One of the things I learned from a job, which I'm sure we all do, is that how I wanted to be treated as an employee and how I didn't want to be treated as an employee. So I think that experience of being an employee is really important if you're thinking about having employees. So I'm very conscious of how my employees feel and how they're motivated and how they're part of a team and how they're, I'm always very careful to criticize somebody privately, to compliment them publicly. I'm very conscious of how they feel.
Right. Which is, you're telling us that's not how you were treated in the government.
Well, I wasn't, not necessarily. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't treated badly, but I just, I think being an employee is a very important part of knowing how to be a good employer.
We're going to move on to another subject. As women, we are not a minority, but we are often treated as if we were one. And we're seeing increased attacks on the ideals of diversity, equity, and inclusion, all of which are crucial to the progress of women and people from marginalized groups. What I'd like to discuss here is how do we fight the backlash and preserve these ideals going forward? How do we keep going on what we quaintly in the early 1970s called women's liberation and now call many other things? Margot, let me start with you because it is, of course, the theme of hidden figures, that these women were literally hidden from history. And I guess what I wonder is, what did you take away from their experience? How did you not just get really depressed all the time when you were realizing what they had gone through personally and professionally?
You know, it was, I mean, you listen to them, you read the oral histories, you look through all of the government records that, were left behind. And yeah, you get incensed about seeing that a woman with the exact same qualifications, everything by the numbers, versus her male counterpart, was sent to the computing pool as opposed to giving an engineering assignment, which is what she really wanted. That happened to Christine Darden, who was one of the women that I wrote about in my book. But then you see what they were able to do despite that. This is one of the things that I find tremendously inspiring, is that in spite of the fact that they couldn't get credit cards in their own name, if they wanted to buy a house or to start a business or, any of these things, they had to have one of the men in their lives approve that. The black women were separate from the white women. They had to use separate bathrooms. They went home to separate neighborhoods. They, had separate waiting rooms in the bus station, all of these things. And yet these women had incredible educations And there was this opportunity for them to live up to the highest of their abilities. That is, despite all of those barriers, that is a really powerful thing. That is a profoundly powerful thing. And to understand that progress doesn't happen in a straight line. And I think that's one of the things that we have to, it is so exhilarating when you see glass ceilings shattered, when you see changes happen, when you see progress, and then you hit the wall and things move back this way. One of the things that was very helpful for me and that I take some comfort in is to look back, 50 years, 60 years, 100 years, whatever, doing the research, and you see that this is something that happens, that there's progress, and then there's a time of moving backwards, and you have to, keep your eye on the long view and persist to, move again when it's possible. So we got to take the long view. That's one of the things that looking backwards, which I never wanted to do. Wall Street is like future, like today and tomorrow and the future. History is a long thing, and that helped.
And you have literally changed. You didn't change history. You changed our understanding of history. You rewrote the history books in a grand way, which is quite extraordinary. Right now in this country, we're going through some rewriting of history, which is not encouraging. What do we risk by not getting the facts right, by not including the people who were part of the history in our history? What are we missing?
What I think we're missing is not just for those people, not just for women, for minorities, who live that history, but for all of us as a nation. I think e pluribus unum, this is America. These stories, whether we tell them or not, these, people existed, they contributed to this country. You contributed, your family, you contributed, your family. All of us, we contributed in our different ways to this country. It's a fascinating fiction in a way, this thing of the United States. It's not a country that has 1,000 years of history and culture that evolved, decade by decade. This is still a new thing that we're doing here. And it really does rely on the faith that there is an ideal that binds all of us together. And that's hard. That is really hard. That is really fragile. As we see in this time right now, and it's really important. And I think that showing how these stories are both distinct to the different people and their backgrounds as they came here, but they are also important to the shared story, the story of everybody in this room and how they came to this country and their experience belongs to me too. It belongs to you. It might belong to my family specifically, but it belongs to all of us as Americans.
It's all part of the bigger story.
We're all part of the bigger story, and I think that is a challenge. That is the delicate, difficulty, beautiful, and really challenging thing about this project we call America.
A question for you from the audience: have you suffered any discrimination as a woman in your careers?
I think there were. If I had certainly on Wall Street was a very male-dominated industry.
You think?
You think, yeah. And I really left before I think the ceiling started to kind of come down. And I see a lot of my female friends who have stayed in more of a corporate structure and the challenges. I was always, and I one of the things that I learned over time, it's sort of like really constitutionally unable to sit in an air-conditioned room for a long period of time, which means that like going to work at a big company just does not work. And so, like Ina and like Michelle, I've You know, I think that there's a lot more liberty to be a woman or to do to be a, you know, minority or whatever, and to sort of pursue some of those things in a way that may not be as straightforward or as open in a corporate setting.
And since we're doing bias, have to go to Michelle now, who has nailed it with the title of her nonprofit, Hate is a Virus. Quite a brilliant title. What is your agenda, and who came up with that wonderful title?
Hate is a Virus started in my living room. And this was pre-COVID, it was pre-lockdown, and we started to see on the media what was going on in our community. And just to backtrack a little bit, the work that I do when we think about the holistic movement that we are trying to achieve as a community, it's really to preserve our stories and to preserve our history, because without knowing our history, we won't know ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And
then can't have a future.
And then there will be no future. And so the DNA of the work that we do is to really tell the American story through the lens of immigrants. Me, myself, my family, we've been here for over 100 years, but a lot of people are like, whoa, I had no idea you've been around here for so long. You know, it's this shocking aha moment. It's like, yeah, we've been here. And so over the years, over several different mentors that I have within our community in Little Tokyo and Los Angeles, it's really important to recognize the work that has been going on since the 60s and 70s. And so Hate is a Virus, which happened right before COVID, isn't the first time we've been talking about this. There are really incredible work that has been going on for decades now, and even working with other communities of color, to make sure that we are seen and we are heard. But Hate is a Virus came about because one of my team members within my fashion business called UPRISERS was just hearing me rant in my living room. Oh my gosh, I think this is gonna be terrible. And she was like, it just sounds like hate is going to be a virus. Mm. And I was like, I stopped, and I was like, there's something here.
The light bulb went on.
And in the past, we've worked on various projects to help document the stories of the diverse stories across the US.
So Hate is a Virus is not just Asian American bias, but that is one of your main focuses, right?
Yes. Yeah, as an Asian person who had various lived experiences and microaggressions and racism and all of that, I think that's, you know, something that I can speak for. But Hate is a Virus was to address that all hate is toxic and it can lead to violence.
Can you give us a success story?
Through Hate is a Virus?
Yeah.
One of, you know, at the top of COVID, when we designed one T-shirt that said Hate is a Virus. We passed it around to our friends, and we said, hey, this is our opportunity in a safe space to tell other folks what is going on and what we're experiencing right now. And that within a matter of 3 weeks, it just took off on social media. People were sharing it all over the world. We were getting influx of emails and DMs on socials, and sharing with us their own experiences, right? We had nurses in hospitals who were saying that we're trying to save lives right now, but we're getting racist remarks. And we had kids messaging us on behalf, well, parents messaging on behalf of their kids of being scared, you know, to be out in public, and elders who were getting really frightened as well. And so this made us realize this storytelling and preservation of stories is a much bigger thing. And we need to create an organization with folks who have been doing the work for a very long time. And how do we come together as a community to support various folks all across the U.S.
Right.
And within all philanthropic foundations and funds that are allocated, we receive very, very little funding within the work that we're doing. And so this gave us an opportunity of, okay, a lot of organizations don't have the resources or the manpower to be writing grants all day long so that they can continue their work in the middle of America, for example. So we wanted to create a fund called Community Action Fund in order to raise $1 million to give back to various organizations. And so within the next year and a half, that became our mission. And we were able to support over 60 organizations through that fund.
Good for you. Bravo. Discrimination, bias?
You know, I think because my life is devoted to a field that's traditionally women's, you know, cookbooks and especially food store, I really don't know that I've ever been the subject. I mean, I would never know because it doesn't really, I can't say that I have.
Right. So that's, yeah, I mean, it would be counterintuitive to trash somebody for being a chef if she's female.
Well, I mean, traditionally women weren't allowed in the kitchen, you know, in restaurants, but I think that's really changed quite a bit.
But I know there is a subject that we can talk about with you, and I guess the general headline here is pressure, challenges and pressure. And you once said to me when I was interviewing you for something else, I find cooking hard, you said, not easy. You also said, I feel enormous pressure when people come here to your house because they expect it's going to be really good.
Is that true?
It's always good. It's always good. But you have felt that pressure.
I always feel that pressure.
How do you deal with it?
You know, I actually think it's good. I think that pressure is really good because it motivates you. I think if I ever found cooking easy, I would be bored in 5 minutes. So I really I like that. I think it gets your creative juices going. I think it gets your adrenaline going. And I mean, I think that's what I love about cooking. It's really hard.
But you've also said about being a hostess that having a plan, or what's your secret ingredient?
Well, you've seen this, right?
I've seen this, yes, exactly.
Is have a plan.
Yeah, not to be totally stressed when people come over.
I literally write down, 5 o'clock turn on the oven to 300 degrees, 5:30 put the chicken in the oven. I mean, I literally write down every single thing that has to happen until dinner is served. Because otherwise I wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning with my hair on fire. Oh my God, I'm having a dinner party. I have to, what am I supposed to do? And I just put that away, make a plan. And I think that's true with any endeavor that's difficult. Make a plan. Figure out how you're going to get it done, and then follow the plan. Doesn't mean the plan's not going to change. It just means that you're starting out with a plan, and you'll eventually get to the finish line. And that's true for business, for dinner, for anything that you want to do.
We
you have to have a plan.
A terrific audience question, and the preface to it is, you've done so much more than just be a cook, a chef, obviously. You've written books, you have TV programs, you're doing an interview program now. Ina has a memoir coming out in a couple of months, more than a couple of months, in October. That's going to be spectacular.
Oh, thank you.
You get involved in a lot of things. Question from the audience is, how do you decide when to say yes?
Well, the first thing is it has to be fun. Otherwise, I don't want to do it. Second thing is I think it has to be good for my customers. So if I'm writing a cookbook, but somebody's not comfortable reading a recipe and figuring out what sauté means, I took on doing a cooking show because I thought for people who would like to learn how to cook, that's a better way to learn, by watching somebody sauté something, so you can learn how to do it. I think the memoir really is, it's not just I did this and I did that, but this is what I was thinking about when I did it, and this is why I did it, and why it worked out. And hopefully it'll inspire people to I mean, a lot of life when you want to have your own business is taking chances. It's just jump off the cliff. You can't know where you're going to land. But if you don't jump off the cliff, you'll never get there. And I mean, a friend of mine describes it as jumping in the pond. You can't figure out what the pond's like when you're standing on the side. You have to jump in the pond. And when you get there, you can look over there and go, that's kind of interesting over there. I'll go investigate that, or that's really interesting. And you need to find a stream that's like where the stream is carrying you along. That's where you should be. And I think that's about taking risks.
It's clearly taking risks. It's clearly what each of you has also done. Pressure? You feel pressure, either one of you, in...
Yeah, always.
Well, you have to write a book that's better than your first one.
Well,
Real pressure.
You know, I'm working on a new book, and it's like, you know, it's gotten rewritten and it's gotten restructured, and it's, you know, I just sent off like a big chunk of it, like, you know, right before I got here to my husband, who reads everything first. And yeah, there's, you know, writing is hard. It's like you said, you know what? Writing is hard. It hurts. It really
hurts.
does hurt.
It's really hard.
It absolutely hurts. And, you know, there are times when it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, which for whatever reason, it's like, you know, I like waste time until like 11 if it's a good writing night. And then it's like, okay, from somehow, you know, 11 o'clock until like 2 o'clock in the morning is magic time. It's quiet. I don't even know what it is that happens, but it's flows. But, you know, it's hard. It hurts. You have to rewrite. It's bad the first time you write it. And you want it to be good. There's pressure. You know, you do want it to be
Sounds
good.
like the pressure's coming from yourself in that regard, though.
That is where the pressure should come from.
Sorry, Ina.
I was going to say, I think the one thing each of us should do is the thing where we lose ourselves. And it sounds like writing is that for you. I mean, for me, when I'm cooking, I don't know what's going on in the world. I'm just like in it. Because it's hard.
Because
and you have to really
hard.
pay attention. You have to do it consciously and be involved. I think it's the way computer geeks always talk about computer time. They just lose themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what we should. Did you feel that way, Beth?
I feel that way when I write.
When you
I can
write.
sit there working on a book or working on an article, and I have no idea what time it is.
Yeah.
I just keep going, and
I think that's what compels people is that when you're in that sort of bubble, and that if you feel that way, that's what you should be doing all the time.
In fashion, in design, you feel that? You get
It's being in that flow, in that zone. There are days
in the zone,
where
exactly.
There are days where probably shouldn't share this right now, but there are days where my partner is like, I think you need to go see some sun. Like, I'm going to drag you outside now. Let's go for a walk.
Didn't Ruth Bader Ginsburg's husband used to come to the office and pick her up and take her home, literally, physically, because she didn't know where she was or what she was doing. She was just so in the zone.
She was very tiny, so he could do that. Yeah, that's good. So we've sort of skirted around current events, and we don't need to get too heavily into politics or any of that. But our world is embroiled in a lot of crises right now, a lot of bad things going on. And interestingly, women's rights and the progress of women is always invariably tied to what's going on in the world. I read you a wonderful quote by a woman named Carrie Baker, the chair of the program for the study of women and gender at Smith College. And she said, and I quote, "Women's rights and representation are a barometer of democracy. The erosion of women's rights is a canary in the coal mine of dying democracies." Makes sense, right? So how do we assure that girls and young women make progress in such times? I feel, Michelle, as if you may be in touch with a lot of young women these days.
I was just speaking to some young women earlier today at UCSD, and one of the interesting conversations that we were having today was they feel so much pressure on themselves. They feel like the whole world is on top of them right now, and they have to fix everything.
Well, I sort of hope they do.
Yeah, me too. This is good. Not bad.
I tell my grandkids they better fix it because we have really screwed it up.
And one of the gals, she said, you know, I'm really passionate about supporting the environment. right now, but because of what's going on right now, it's really about the people, but I'm not sure how to navigate both of those things. And this book that I'm reading right now, Environmental Intersectionalism, I think is really, really fascinating. I encourage everyone to read it because it talks about how you cannot save the planet, you cannot save the earth without supporting the people first. And she talks a lot about this term intersectionalism, and I think that across gender, across race, across socioeconomic status that we're in, it's all tied together. And so if we are an expert in gender studies, a professor within that realm, I think it's really finding community, diverse communities where we can all work together so that we can seek positive change. So when it comes to women, how?
How about this vote?
Huh?
Vote.
Vote. Well, yes. Okay.
And find out really who the candidates are. I mean, people are delusional about who the candidates are.
Right.
And you have to really know what their votes are.
I know the answer with you. Has either of you considered running for office? How do we get terrific women to run? Margot, there's a look. There's a word for that look, which I don't need to. What about you, Michelle?
No.
You sure?
I think so.
How do we get, would we all agree that, barring some people, having more women in elective office is a good thing, right? We agree with that? How do we get more women, more terrific women, more smart women, more women who care about the rest of us to run for office?
I was recently just invited to the White House, and that was the first time I've ever been to any sort of settings as that. And being able to meet other Asian American women, other Asian American men who are activating or advocating for our communities was really inspiring. And seeing them and doing the work that they're trying to do made me realize that this isn't really the place for me, but I can make positive change in other areas. And so I think it does take, not just in policy work, it takes all of us in all different aspects and sectors to be able to, again, work together.
How about you deal with a lot of young people in your nonprofit, and your fashion is for young people. How to convince them to get involved? What's the answer?
I actually think that they are already involved. The next generation, I even just from the talk this morning, it was so inspiring, and it made me feel very hopeful for the future because they're angry. They're ready to see change, and they're already talking amongst themselves of what they need to do in order to rise. We even think about what was going on in the 60s and the 70s, and UCLA students at that time, there was an Asian American group that started a movement called GIDRA. And that GIDRA, G-I-D-R-A, and that was the first publication that really talked about the Asian American experience. And that has progressed into what we're seeing today within the Asian diaspora. So students in schools, people who are passionate about it, I think it's how do we empower them to show up?
Well, and here's the flip side of that question. What have we missed? And Margot, I feel as if you're the perfect person for this question. What have we missed by not having had more women in power and more women in leadership positions? And take it back, if you will. What did we miss by not knowing about those women at NASA? What do we miss by not assuming that women can do anything? What is the answer to that?
Well, I think the first thing that you miss is you don't know that you've gotten the best people unless you've looked for all the people. If you look for all the people, then you really do know when you've gotten the best people. Like Sally Ride's story, it's a great story, So I think one is you want to know that you have the people. two is you do have to tell these stories. Like feeling every generation that you're reinventing the wheel is not the best way to move forward. I think it really, and we talk about pressure, the idea that you have to be that one to break the glass ceiling. You have to be the first woman or the only woman of color, or whatever it is. The stakes are so much lower if you look back in history and said, wait a minute, those people were doing that way back then.
They were already there.
They were already there. There's a real confidence that comes to that. So I think, I think that really is. It was something that I had never really understood and sort of discounted. Like, okay, the power of storytelling, but it really makes a difference. It really does. And I think, especially for women, understanding that there are times when there are still glass ceilings to break, but there were women in the past who were doing these extraordinary things under severely limited circumstances, very circumscribed. And, let's look at it as a case study. If they did that, how did they do it? What did they do? Who were their allies? How did they, move through these different organizations? Let's analyze what they did, and let's use them as a playbook for the future.
What is it, do you think, what do women bring to jobs, to leadership that men don't?
Consensus.
Okay.
I think women work well with other people. They figure out what to do and they all do it together. It's not a hierarchy, it's a completely different system. And I think very often...
We're talking big generalities.
Big generalities,
here.
but I think very often organizations are hierarchical. And I think in order for women to succeed, either they have to change the organization, which isn't going to happen, or start their own organizations. I think it's really hard to change an organization that's hierarchical. Yep.
We've had a question that was on my list, and several of you have asked this question. A lot of what we're talking about is what we can do to get women and girls ahead. What can women and girls do? What can boys and men do? What can dads and uncles and cousins and boyfriends and just other guys do to help women get ahead? Oh, silence.
What? No, I think when I mean, I don't have children, so I really have no standing for saying this, but I think young girls are applauded for being pretty, and young boys are applauded for being strong, and I think that has to change.
Yep.
And until we change how they get approval, we're never going to change the organizations.
You also, when you and I were talking earlier, Ina, we talked about the old superwoman myth, the having it all.
Having it all, yeah. Until we teach our children, our boy children, to share their responsibility, it's never going to work, because it's always a woman's responsibility. They have I just know this from my friends. They're in charge of the kids and the household and their jobs. And until men share that, it's never going to change.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually...
They don't have it all. They're just doing it all.
Right. Right. I did an interview with Justice Ginsburg once, and she said nothing would change until we figure out the child care thing. Yeah. Nothing will change in terms of women's rights until we get that settled. I love when somebody called her from school about her child, and she said, well, he has a father, too. Indeed.
Or she, or
By
whatever.
the way, I'm curious, does the superwoman myth resonate with other generations? Superwoman myth is something that we certainly were aware of. I was early in my career, and superwoman myth was the myth that you could have it all or you couldn't have it all, and there was a big back and forth. Could you have it all as a woman, or couldn't you have it all as a woman? And if you said you could and then you failed, well, then you just let every other woman in the world down, which is insane. I guess my question is it
Is it
still out
different?
there?
Is it different
Is it
now?
any different, do you think, for younger generations?
Speaking as not really a younger generation, but
Well, you're younger than I am, so it's okay.
I wonder if there's a broader reevaluation with not just women but people in general of this of what it is that you're sort of always like, okay, you've got that hustle, you're going to get this, and then you're going to there, and then you get the bigger one, and and I think maybe there is a reevaluation of that, and that a lot of people are opting out of this sort of just straight line, full force, the master of the universe thing that I had in my head, which
It's what we used to call the rat race.
The rat race, and that it's it is, there are trade-offs, and I think I see some of the trade-offs now in a way that I didn't when I was right out of school in 22. And, you kind of think there's a free lunch to working really hard. If you know how to work really hard, you're like, well, I could pull 100-hour weeks, like for, however long it takes. And then you think that because you can do it, it's somehow a free lunch. You don't see the trade-offs until you get older. I don't know. And maybe younger people, I don't know, are sort of looking at all of us, in line ahead of you and saying, you know what, I'm just going to cut this off right now. I don't know. What do you think?
I think I'm still working through it, to be honest. I mean, it's interesting because within our circle, within our network, we're starting to see very, very strong women who own their own businesses. They're starting to have children. And what does that lifestyle look like? How can you still support the family, but then also be this badass woman entrepreneur? And there are folks that are doing that. And so the more that we can see that happening, and really practicing this idea of breaking those gender biases and norms within the household, I think would be really important for this next generation to see. Like, us women don't have to always be in the kitchen or staying at home taking
Unless
care.
Unless you want.
Yes.
This is a wonderful question from the audience, and I'm going to quote it in full. As a young teen, how do I figure out what I really want to do, what I'm really passionate about? And how do I then move towards being a leader in that field? Ina?
I can answer. Years and years ago, I met a woman who was a therapist, but specialized in figuring out what somebody's career should be. And I said to her, "That's so interesting. What an interesting choice of careers." And she said, I said, "What do you ask people to find out what they should be doing?" And she said, "I asked them what they used to do when they were 10. Before they had should be a lawyer, should be a doctor, what everybody in society wanted them to do. What did you just love doing? And that's what you should do in your career."
Whoa.
I thought that was a really good
That's a great
insight.
answer.
Yeah.
Whoever you are, young teenager who sent that question, I hope that's helpful. Anybody else want to add to that, or?
Well, speaking as someone who tried a lot of different things, I think that's a part of it. But I think also, women. I think one of the you asked the question, what do women bring? I think women tend to be very conscientious about a lot of work, and the flip side of that is that maybe we are more averse to failure and feel, kind of take it personally. If it's like, I failed, it's because I'm not smart, because I'm not good, because I'm not good at this.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And
boys don't have imposter syndrome.
You can lose $1 billion and people will give you like $2 billion. Like that's, if you fail big, you get another chance. But in order to get the chance to fail big, you've got to have these smaller failures. And it's not a permanent thing. And it's something that you've got to embrace and kind of go to the next step. But I feel especially at that sensitive time of adolescence when you're trying to figure out who you are and what the world is, that being a little less hard on yourself about failing or making mistakes or that kind of thing to the extent that's possible, I think if I could give advice to myself at that age, that's what I would say. Just, working hard is great. Doing your best is amazing. Being ambitious is great. Perfection is going to hold you back.
I love
you and I
that.
have talked about this too. It's one thing to decide what you want to do, but the other thing is, I think I find in the show where I interview people, what's really remarkable to me is the people that are successful have hit wall after wall, and they've just found their way around it or over it or through it. They don't let anything stop them from what their vision is.
Well, the mistakes are the best way to learn.
But
Is
that's,
the first part
you
of
first
it.
hit the wall.
First hit the wall.
Yeah. So you work through that, which is really important.
You have to. Yeah. And there are things you can't learn unless you hit that wall.
Yeah.
Like you just can't learn it any other way. And then you learn it, but yeah, you have to have those. If you haven't had those mistakes and failures, then your trajectory is too low.
If you never fall down, you haven't skied hard enough.
Yeah.
Speculate, fantasize. What if women ran the world? How might things change?
How might things change in
How
the
might
future?
things be different today if women ran the world?
Oh, from around the world.
Yes.
I have so many thoughts, but there was a really interesting article by Harvard Business Review, and this was written during COVID, and it says that women are able to become better leaders during times of crisis. And it was a really fascinating article.
Was it written by a woman or a man? I'm really curious.
That's actually a good question. I'm not sure. But they had studies where they tested a group of like 60,000 folks, half women, half men, pre-COVID, and then also during COVID. And it showed actually the same statistic, that because we are able to honor collaboration more, and we have a different type of leadership skills that we bring to the table, we are more conscientious and empathetic towards even just like diversity within teams and leaders. It all kind of culminates into this idea that when there is crisis, we're able to kind of step up. So
Exciting.
with that thought, if women ran the world,
I don't know. Would they bomb each other? I can't imagine it.
You can't imagine
Would they
women.
invade-
I can imagine women bombing each other, but
You can't.
certain women.
Invading other countries? I can't imagine it.
Yeah, well, there's that. Michelle, question from the audience. What is one simple thing women and girls can do to make the world a better place?
when we are in positions where we can bring others along, let's open up those doors. I think there's so much, there's room in every space for us to be able to bring more diverse voices and representation into this space.
Cool. You have an answer to that? Yes.
I read once, and it's always stayed with me, the measure of a society is how it treats its women, because the women teach the children. I think the women can teach respect to all children. I think we need to respect each other more, and it's not a, I mean, that's the issue of diversity, is respecting everybody equally, no matter what their station in life is, no matter where they came from, is to treat people with respect. And if that's taught to children, they'll bring it through their lives.
Yes. Margot, a question for you from the audience. What is the most important thing we as a society can do to get more girls into computer science?
Start them as young as possible. You know, I mean, I think there are a lot of disputes about school and when kids get, math education, and kids are so interested in things. They don't have the idea that, like, I should be interested in this or I'm not interested in that or whatever. It is, my son is young, and so I look at him every single day. He learned something new, and it's just this exuberance for learning something. And I'm already kind of ruining the time which I hope never comes, but I think it comes for all of us when you start to put the blinders on and you don't have that just complete open mind to something. And I think exposing girls before these ideas of, girls can't do math or computer science is for boys, before that takes hold, expose them, when they're really young. And I think that doing that, maybe that's the way, that it's sort of, you plant the seed and you nourish it and it grows up tall and strong before, the sunlight is blocked, I guess. I think starting it young is a great idea.
I wonder, as a result of your book and the film, you've obviously spoken to people still at NASA and people who were there and left. What's been the reaction from the women at NASA who maybe went through similar things but were not part of the Hidden Figures class? I'm talking obviously about women engineers, women computer scientists, women who had suffered their own discrimination, no doubt, but were not part of the group that you told the story of.
They had a lot of similar experiences.
Is it your sense that that's pretty much in the past now, or do you think it's still there?
A lot of things have changed. We really do have to look and see. When I think about the women, so many of them have passed away since the time that I interviewed them. I went to 2 funerals earlier this year of these extraordinary women. A lot has changed since the time they were working. Some of the things are still similar, and stories of female engineers or group leaders, not necessarily an engineer working in a group, but maybe the leader of the group, doing things so that they won't be mistaken for the intern, and things like that still happens. So, I think that's, we have to be conscious of both those things, that there's a lot of progress that we've made. And there's still things that we have to change.
I think I have a strong recollection of it. One of the speeches Sally once gave, and she gave a lot of speeches, and she was asked that question about how to get more girls into computer science, and she laid a lot of it on how to react to them, and that parents shouldn't say to when the little girl says, "I'd like to study science," well, wouldn't you rather study French literature? This is 20 years ago, and when Sally was talking about it, I think some of that has no doubt changed. But that we give out very obvious signals, and they may feel subtle, but they're all there. That we steer our younger generations in ways that mesh more with our feelings about what they should be doing. So it's something worth considering. On some other subjects, Ina, we have 3 audience questions for you.
Uh-oh.
How did you incorporate science and physics into your kitchen
and
lab?
Physics?
Yeah, that was the question.
If I understood physics, I would have incorporated it, but I didn't. I actually think cooking is really like science. And I was always interested in science when I was in school. And I think cooking really is, I see every recipe as a science experiment. But instead of ending up with hydrochloric acid, you end up with brownies. Much more interesting.
Way more interesting.
Way more interesting. But I'm always changing one variable. I'm, adding more baking powder or taking away some sugar. I'm always changing one variable, and it's just like a really good science experiment.
I also want to ask you something which has nothing to do with women in leadership, except that Ina's a leader and she's a woman, and so you'll want to hear this anyway. I was fascinated how you came up with new recipes, because the whole business of you had something in your head.
My head, yeah.
Yeah, to explain that, because I think it's creative art, and I think we all do it in a different way, and I'd never thought about doing it in terms of food. But
well, it really is like a science experiment. You think of something that you'd like to find out about, you'd like to test, I start with an idea. I have a very good flavor memory. So if I've tasted something 20 years ago, I'll remember what it tastes like. And then I'll just say, okay, you know, I remember Lipton's onion soup dip mix. Remember, we all remember that. I don't know if you're old enough, you remember it from the 60s. But why isn't it better? So I will, with all due respect to Lipton's, so I'll say, okay, how about if I make it with real onions and saute them? So I'll start experimenting with sauteing onions until they get really sweet and flavorful, and then add ingredients and come up with my own onion dip.
And then in the interim, if you're really lucky, you get to be one of the people when she says, I'm not sure this is quite right yet, is it?
Well, it's usually way at the end.
Way at the end.
Nobody gets to taste the experiments. In fact, my employees aren't even allowed to take them home. If they think it's good, but I don't think it's right, maybe you'll come for the last, like, should we do this, should we do that? But
I just think it's fascinating that you have
Yeah.
something in your brain, in your taste brain.
Right, and I may make something 25 times until I hear that little, like, ping that says, that's what I was looking for.
Just, I have to get back to you with another question, but Michelle, do you feel that way about design? Do you have something that you want to design?
All the time. I
Right.
think we actually have these massive foam boards in our space with just inspiration. And, you know, having that embed in our subconscious, and then also community stories, right? We're inspired by these stories. And so how do we intersect both of these things into good design, but a storytelling piece that becomes a conversation starter?
Love it. Okay, we're going to start wrapping up here now, and I want to ask each of you for one takeaway for the audience. Our theme is women in leadership. How do we get there? How do we make it happen? Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Go ahead, Ina.
Figure out what you love to do, because if you love it, you'll be really good at it. And then jump off a cliff. You'll figure it out when you're on the way down. But if you're scared and you're putting yourself out there, you'll be more likely to figure it out because you don't have a choice.
Okay.
Just put yourself in danger.
And before I move on, sorry, I have another audience question that I have to ask you, which is, what's one meal that everyone should know by heart how to make?
Roast chicken. Which is, can I just say this? It's sometimes called engagement chicken, because so many women that I know have made it for their boyfriends and then have been engaged within 24 hours. And that's a powerful chicken.
That's one powerful chicken. All right. Sorry. Well, so you gave us two takeaways. That's good. Takeaway from Michelle.
I always like to say it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so the work that we want to see, the positive change that we want to see, how can we all work together for the long haul?
Love it. Wonderful. Margot.
I'm going to take both those answers, which is, I think we've got to take the long view. I really think that's, to just remember, again, this is a marathon. And then just do it. It's going to be hard. It's going to hurt. You're going to skin your knees, and you're going to get back up again. That is it. That is the whole thing. And a lot of people never jump, and you don't want to be the person at the end of your life who says, I wish I'd done it. You just got to go do it.
Brilliant.
That's great.
Wonderful suggestions. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank all of you. I want to leave you with just a couple of thoughts, the reality of the world we live in. Before Sally flew the first time in 1983, I was interviewing her, and I asked her if she felt under pressure. And she said, yeah, I do feel under pressure. And she went down a list. She said, I feel under pressure not to mess up. And that's all she said. I feel under pressure not to mess up. And I knew exactly what she meant. She didn't want to mess up for NASA because she really cared about NASA. She didn't want to mess up for the mission because she cared about the mission. She didn't want to mess up for her crewmates because she really cared about them. And she didn't want to mess up for other women because she knew, rightly or wrongly, that if she didn't do a good job, it was going to be put on all other women. And I leave you finally with this wonderful quotation from Eleanor Roosevelt, first female delegate to the United Nations after her husband, the president, had died. She said, "I knew that if I failed to be a useful member, it would not be considered merely that I as an individual had failed, but that all women had failed, and there would be little chance for others to serve in the near future." It's not right, it's not fair, but it's what we're all up against.
It's the truth.
And we owe it to each other to stand up for ourselves and for each other. Thank you very much for being here. Panel, we're going to exit left before they do. Thank you all
so
for
much.
coming. See you next year.